My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I used to believe I had the perfect life. A beautiful 4-bedroom home in Greenwich, Connecticut. A loving husband named Daniel, tall, charming, and successful. A wardrobe full of dresses I never had a reason to wear twice. From the outside, we were what every couple on our street wanted to be. Dinner parties on Fridays, church on Sundays, Christmas cards that people actually kept on their refrigerators. I met Daniel when I was 26 at a charity gala in Manhattan. He walked in wearing a navy suit, shook my father's hand, and smiled at me like I was the only person in the room. My father, George Harrington, one of the most powerful real estate developers on the East Coast, liked him immediately. That should have been my first clue. When a man impresses your father before he even tries to impress you, ask yourself, who is he really trying to win over? We married 6 months later. A July wedding at my family's estate in the Hamptons. 300 guests. White roses everywhere. My mother cried. My father gave a toast that made the whole room applaud. I stood there in my dress, looking at Daniel, thinking, this is it. This is the beginning of everything. But our wedding night was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel said he was tired from the planning. Said it had been an overwhelming day. I believed him. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself it would get better. That's what women like me are taught to do. Be patient, be understanding, be grateful for what you have. Weeks passed. Then months. He was kind to me. Always. He brought me coffee in the mornings, remembered my birthday, held my hand at family events. But behind our bedroom door, there was only silence. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with me. Was I not pretty enough? Not interesting enough? Had I done something without knowing, so I stopped asking? I buried myself in charity work, in book clubs, in long lunches with friends who envied my life. I smiled and nodded when they called Daniel the perfect husband. And I believed, truly believed, that love meant something different for us. Something quieter. Something above the ordinary. 15 years. I gave this man 15 years of my life. And I never once suspected the truth that was hiding in plain sight. Not until the day everything fell apart in under 60 seconds. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my entire world collapsed. I remember the details so clearly. The way the autumn light came through the kitchen window, the smell of fresh coffee, the sound of birds outside. Ordinary things. The kind of things you remember because they were the last moments before everything changed. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost poured my coffee and moved on with my day. But something, call it instinct, call it fate, made me answer. Mrs. Mitchell. This is Officer Karen Hayes with the Greenwich Police Department. I'm so sorry to tell you this. Your husband, Daniel Mitchell, was found this morning. Ma'am, he's gone. That word didn't make sense at first. I stood there with my phone pressed to my ear, the coffee mug still warm in my other hand, not understanding what gone meant for a man I had eaten breakfast with just 2 hours ago. They told me he had jumped from the Riverside Bridge at 7:14 in the morning. No note. No warning. Was gone. I don't remember sitting down, but somehow I was on the kitchen floor. I don't remember screaming, but my neighbor said she heard me from across the yard. The next few hours were a blur of police officers, phone calls, my mother driving through tears, and Daniel's business partner Marcus arriving with red eyes and a face I couldn't read. What I remember most was the numbness. Not grief, not yet. Just numbness. Because the man I was supposed to cry for felt, in that moment, like someone I had never really known at all. At the funeral, I sat in the front row in black, holding my composure the way I had always held everything. Carefully with both hands, praying nothing would crack. People came up to me with hugs and condolences and casseroles. His colleagues called him brilliant. His college friends called him loyal. Everyone had a story about Daniel Mitchell, the great man, the generous man, the devoted husband. I sat there and smiled and said thank you, and inside I felt completely hollow. My father sat beside me the entire day. He barely spoke. I noticed he didn't cry, and at the time I thought it was just his way. Stoic, controlled, the way he always was in public. But looking back now, I wonder if he already knew something. I wonder if the guilt had already started eating at him. 3 days after the funeral, my father's attorney called. He asked me to come in for a reading of my father's will, because George Harrington had passed away quietly in his sleep the same week as Daniel, from a heart attack he had apparently been hiding from the family for months. 2 men gone in 1 week. A husband and a father. And somewhere in the wreckage of that grief, a letter was waiting. Sealed, addressed to me in Daniel's handwriting, sitting inside a safety deposit box that nobody had told me existed. I wouldn't find it for 7 more days. And when I did, I wished, for just one moment, that I never had, that I had always known my father was wealthy. But $500 million was a number I had never said out loud. I sat across from Richard Calloway, my father's attorney for over 30 years, in his mahogany-paneled office in Midtown Manhattan, and I listened as he read the will in a careful, measured voice. My 2 brothers, James and Andrew, sat on either side of me. They had flown in from Chicago and Los Angeles respectively, both already wearing the subtle expressions of men calculating numbers in their heads. Them why father had divided his estate into 3 parts. James received the company's operational assets, the construction arm, the commercial properties. Andrew received a portfolio of investments worth close to $100 million. And I, the youngest, the daughter, the one everyone had always quietly underestimated, received the entirety of his private real estate holdings, his personal investment accounts, and a trust structured in my name alone. Sarah Grace Harrington Mitchell receives the sum of $512 million, in full, unconditional, and irrevocable trust, to be managed solely at her discretion. I heard James make a sound beside me. I didn't look at him. What nobody in that room knew, what even I didn't fully understand yet, was why. Why me? Why now? My father and I had always been close, yes. But this was not a normal inheritance. This felt like a message. Like my father had been building something, protecting something, keeping something safe, and he had chosen me to carry it forward. On the drive home, I sat in the back of a car service and stared at the city passing by. I had just become one of the wealthiest women in Connecticut. I should have felt something monumental. Instead, I just kept thinking about Daniel, about the bridge, about how he had kissed me on the cheek that Tuesday morning and said, "Have a good day," like any other morning, and then drove to a bridge and never came back. That evening, as I walked through our empty house in Greenwich, I found myself in Daniel's study. I had avoided it since his death. His reading glasses were still on the desk. His coffee cup, unwashed, still sat on the windowsill. I sat down in his chair and just breathed. And that's when I saw it, partially hidden under a legal pad, just the corner of an envelope sticking out. My name written in Daniel's handwriting. Not Sarah. Not Mrs. Mitchell. Just Sarah. In the same careful cursive he used when he wrote anniversary cards, and my hands trembled as I reached for it. But before I could open it, my phone rang. It was Marcus, Daniel's business partner. His voice was strange. Strained in a way I hadn't heard before. "Sarah," he said slowly, "before you find out from someone else, there's something you need to know about Daniel. About why he kept his distance from you. About the reason your father gave you everything." Pause. A long, painful pause. "It's about a man named James Elliott." I had never heard that name before in my life. By the time I went to sleep that night, I had looked up James Elliott online. And the photograph I found, a smiling man in a blue shirt, standing next to Daniel at what looked like a company retreat, made my stomach drop to the floor. Because James Elliott looked at my husband the way I had always wanted my husband to look at me. 7 days after Daniel died, I finally opened the letter. I had carried it with me every day since I found it in his study. Unopened, tucked inside my coat pocket, close to my chest like something I both needed and feared. I'd take it out sometimes, just to look at his handwriting on the envelope. "Sarah, Just my name. Nothing else. I sat on the back porch of our Greenwich home on a cold November evening, wrapped in the cashmere blanket Daniel had given me for our 10th anniversary. The yard was dark. The neighborhood was quiet. And I finally broke the seal. His handwriting was careful, deliberate, like he had written and rewritten every word. Sarah, by the time you read this, you already know I'm gone. I'm so sorry. Not for who I am. I can't be sorry for that anymore. But for what I put you through. For the silence. For the distance. For the 15 years I asked you to live inside a life that was never entirely real. He wrote that he had known since he was 19 years old that he was gay. That he had hidden it from his family, from his colleagues, from the world. Because in the world he grew up in the circles his family moved in, it was simply not an option. His father had made that clear. The business world he operated in had made that clear. So he had buried it. And then he met my father. George Harrington had approached Daniel 2 years before our wedding with a proposal. Not romantic, but financial. He had discovered Daniel's secret. And rather than expose him, my father offered him a deal. Marry Sarah, maintain the appearance of a stable family man, keep the Harrington name socially intact, and in return, receive full backing for his business empire. My father had sold me. Like a piece in a chess game he had been playing for decades. Daniel wrote that he had grown to genuinely care for me. As a friend, as a partner, as someone he deeply respected. That James Elliot had been in his life for 11 of our 15 years. And that James was the only person who had ever known the full truth. He begged me not to hate him. He said that in the end, the guilt had become something he could no longer carry. You deserved a real love, Sarah. You always did. I hope one day you find it. And I hope one day you can forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours. I folded the letter. I placed it back in the envelope. I sat in the dark for a very long time. And then something happened inside me that I had not expected. The grief, the confusion, the devastation, it all slowly, quietly, turned into something else entirely. Something cold. Something focused. Something that felt, for the first time in 15 years, like power. I did not cry. Not once. Not after I finished that letter. Instead, I called my lawyer. Not my father's attorney, not the family's long-standing firm, but Catherine Reeves, a sharp, quiet woman I had met at a charity board meeting 3 years prior. I had always liked her. She had the kind of eyes that told you she had already considered every outcome before you'd even finished your sentence. I need to understand everything, I told her. Every document, every agreement, every deal my father made that involved my name. What Catherine uncovered over the next 72 hours was worse than I had imagined. The arrangement between my father and Daniel was not just a gentleman's understanding. It was a formal, signed legal contract. Drawn up in 2006, notarized, witnessed. It outlined the terms of our marriage in cold, transactional language. Daniel would marry Sarah Harrington, maintain the marriage publicly for no fewer than 15 years, and receive $40 million in seed capital plus full access to Harrington commercial properties for his development projects. In exchange, my father received social credibility, a son-in-law who was powerful and controllable, and the continuation of the Harrington family image. The bride was not party to this agreement and is not to be informed of its existence. I am the bride. I was the asset. I was the thing they traded Richard Calloway. My father's attorney, the man who had read me my inheritance with such measured calm, had drafted the contract himself. He had sat at that funeral and shaken my hand and told me my father had loved me very much. And he had known the entire time exactly what had been done to me. Marcus Webb, Daniel's business partner, had known for years as well. His phone call to me, the one where he first mentioned James Elliot's name, had not been an act of kindness. Catherine discovered that Marcus had quietly been positioning himself to take over Daniel's company shares in the event of his death, using a secondary agreement he had drafted with Daniel under financial duress. He had called me not to help me, but to manage me. To give me just enough truth to keep me emotional and distracted while he moved the pieces. He had underestimated me entirely. My brothers, James and Andrew, I learned, had both known about the contract for the last 3 years. My father had told them when he was diagnosed with his heart condition. They had said nothing. They had sat beside me at that funeral, at the will reading, over family dinners, and said absolutely nothing. They all built their lives on your silence, Catherine said quietly, sliding the documents across the table toward me. The question now is what you want to do with your voice. I looked at the papers, the signatures, the dates. At 15 years of my life reduced to clauses and conditions and the assumption that I would never be strong enough or smart enough to ever find any of this out, I picked up a pen. Not to sign anything. Just to hold it. To remind myself that from this moment forward, I was the one writing the story. I want everything, I told Catherine. Every share. Every property. Every account tied to any agreement that used my name. And I want Richard Calloway disbarred. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled, just slightly. Good, she said. Let's begin. I have never been a dramatic person. I was not raised to cause scenes. I was raised to be composed, to be gracious, to make everyone around me comfortable, even at my own expense. That was what had made me so easy to use. So when I decided to take back everything that had been taken from me, I did it the same way my father had always done business. Quietly, legally, and completely. The first move was Marcus Webb. Catherine had uncovered that his secondary agreement with Daniel, the one designed to give him control of the company's shares, contained a clause that voided it entirely if Daniel's death was ruled a suicide rather than natural causes. It had been ruled a suicide. The clause had been triggered. Marcus Webb had no legal claim to anything. When his own attorney informed him of this, I was told he went silent for a very long time. I acquired Daniel's full company stake within 30 days. I did not sell it. I installed a new board, appointed a CEO I had personally vetted, and restructured the entire leadership. Marcus Webb was removed from his position by a shareholder vote. He was escorted from the building on a Wednesday afternoon with 2 boxes of personal items and a severance agreement he had no power to negotiate. The second move was Richard Calloway. Catherine filed a formal complaint with the Connecticut State Bar Association, supported by the contract itself, which constituted a clear breach of fiduciary duty, conflict of interest, and participation in a fraudulent agreement involving a third party who was deliberately kept uninformed. The bar launched a full investigation within 2 weeks. Richard Calloway's law license was suspended pending review. His firm lost 4 major clients within a month. The last I heard, he had retired quietly to Florida. He helped write the contract that erased my voice. I made sure he never wrote another one. My brothers were more complicated. They were family. And despite everything, I still felt the weight of that word. But I was not naive. James and Andrew had known for 3 years and chosen their inheritance over their sister. So I chose accordingly. I instructed Catherine to audit every financial transaction connected to my father's estate over the past decade. What we found: discrepancies, undisclosed transfers, assets moved in anticipation of my father's death, gave us grounds to contest portions of their inheritance through probate court. I did not take everything from them. I am not that person. But I took enough that they understood clearly that I was no longer someone to be managed or overlooked. James called me 3 times. I did not answer. Andrew sent a long email full of justifications and apologies and the word complicated. I read it once and archived it. The last piece was the hardest. James Elliott, Daniel's partner, the man he had loved in secret for 11 years, reached out to me through a mutual attorney. He was not aggressive. He was not entitled. He simply asked, with what seemed like genuine pain, if I hated him. I thought about it for a long time before I responded. I told him the truth. I didn't hate him. I had nothing against a man for being loved. What had been done to me was not his doing. It was done by men with power who believed the rules didn't apply to them, and by a system that had taught me my entire life to be grateful for the cage. I wished him well. Meant it. And then I sold the Greenwich house, packed what mattered, and started over. I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, in February. I chose it because nobody there knew my name. Nobody there had ever heard of George Harrington or Daniel Mitchell, or the Greenwich wedding with 300 guests and white roses. I was just a woman with a suitcase and a view of the water, starting from somewhere that was entirely, finally, her own. I bought a house. Not a mansion, not an estate. Just a house. Wide porch, old oak tree in the yard, the kind of floors that creak when you walk on them in the morning. I painted the kitchen yellow, which I had always wanted to do and which Daniel had always said was too bright. I planted tomatoes in the back garden that I had absolutely no idea how to grow. I adopted a dog named Biscuit who destroyed 2 pairs of shoes in the first week and whom I loved immediately and completely. For the first time in 15 years, I woke up in a home that was entirely mine. No performance. No pretending. No waiting for someone to need me before I was allowed to exist. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights when the anger came back, sharp and sudden, like stepping on glass in the dark. Nights when I'd sit on that porch with a glass of wine and think about all the versions of my life that had been quietly stolen from me. The children I might have had. The love I might have known. The woman I might have become 10 years earlier if anyone, just one person, had told me the truth. But grief, I've learned, is not a place you live. It's a place you pass through. And the only direction is forward. I established the Harrington Women's Foundation in my mother's maiden name, a non-profit providing legal support and financial literacy resources to women who have been deceived or financially controlled in their marriages. In its first year, we helped over 200 women across 12 states. I hired Catherine Reeves as our lead legal advisor. She took a significant pay cut and said it was the best decision she'd ever made. I am not a victim. I refuse that word and I refuse the story it tells. What happened to me was real, and it was wrong, and the men who did it have lived with the consequences. But I am not defined by what was done to me. I am defined by what I did next. I am 43 years old. I have $500 million, a yellow kitchen, a dog named Biscuit, and a life that is entirely, unapologetically mine. And somewhere out there, in offices and boardrooms and quiet houses where women are being managed and silenced and told to be grateful, there are women just like I was. Women who haven't found the letter yet. Women who haven't opened it. Women who are still waiting for permission to be angry, to be powerful, to take up space. This story is for them. They built an empire on my silence. I built a better one with my voice. The end and the beginning. If Sarah's story moved you, you are not alone. Thousands of women are living inside silent marriages right now, waiting for someone to tell them the truth. Share this story. It might reach someone who needs it today.